Welcome to the Stock Talk Learn and Earn Video Q&A podcast. I'm Dave Jackson. Vancouver, BC-based Giga Metals Corp is engaged in the acquisition and exploration of mineral properties in Canada. The company is focused on two of the key metals used in the batteries of electric vehicles, or EVs, nickel and cobalt. It's currently developing the Turnagain nickel deposit, a giant nickel sulfide deposit in north-central BC. Today, we're very happy to be joined by CEO Mark Jarvis. Thanks very much for joining us here at Stockhouse today, Mark.
Well, it's very nice to join you, Dave.
Great to have you. Now, Mark, to start off with, can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and the history of the company?
Well, I got involved with this company in 2004, believe it or not. I essentially took over the company because I liked what I saw, which was the potential to develop an extremely large deposit that would be developed as an open pit mine. So very similar to the sort of very low grade but very profitable copper porphyry deposits that we have so many of in British Columbia, except that the sulfide is nickel rather than copper, but a very similar model. And I like large deposits. They're challenging, but that's what I like. And since I've been, since I got involved in 2004, we've done a lot of drilling. We've defined an extremely large resource. We've done extensive metallurgy and engineering, culminating in a PEA that was released earlier this year that models production of a nice, clean, high-grade nickel cobalt concentrate, averaging 18% nickel, 1% cobalt. And we're looking at building something that would have a capacity of 37,000 tons per year of nickel, which is giant. And it would have a mine life of 37 years. That's what the PEA describes. So it's been a long time, since 2004. But what I'm finding is right now things are really heating up. This whole electric vehicle revolution has given new life to nickel, and to cobalt. It's a whole new demand source that is growing crazy fast, and we're finding that there's a lot of interest in our project right now.
Now, Mark, can you update our investor audience and your Giga Metals shareholders on any new company developments, especially in the wake of COVID-19?
Well, it didn't affect us that much. We just work remotely like a lot of people. But right now, we do have a drill program ongoing up at the property. And so we're observing COVID protocols, of course, in camp and being very careful about how we conduct our business up there. But this drill program, well, drilling and other work, is designed to collect the information we need to advance the engineering to the pre-feasibility level. So we're getting more detailed engineering on all sorts of different aspects of the project.
Now, you've just launched trading on the OTCQX market in the US, Mark. Can you expand on this initiative for our investor audience and what it really means?
Well, the QX is the senior tier of the OTC market in the United States. And as a practical matter, what it means is that if you're on the QX, a US broker is allowed to recommend your stock to his or her clients. And, the QB, they're not allowed to. So, the QX is quite a desirable listing for that reason. And it just opens up a much wider audience to our story. And it's an audience, I think, that is quite interested in electric vehicles and the whole supply chain for electric vehicles. So I think the U.S. retail audience is a very desirable place to be for a company like ours.
100% there. Now, in a recent Stockhouse article, we detailed how Giga Metals is the new nickel play investors have been looking for. Can you explain to us, Mark, simply how?
Well, the sheer size of it, um, and the fact that we're really focused on the battery supply chain. We see that as critical. And our peers in North America, and specifically in Canada, other large low-grade nickel deposits that are being developed are targeted at the ferronickel market. In other words, they've done engineering studies that envisage selling to the stainless steel business by supplying a mix of nickel and iron to the stainless steel business. We're not focused on that at all. We could, but we think that batteries are the future for nickel. And so all of our engineering studies are done with that in mind. And in fact, we recently announced that, whereas our PEA modeled production of a high-grade concentrate, we have really good expertise in-house in the nickel market, in particular our president, Martin Vidra, who used to sell nickel products and cobalt products to end users when he worked at Sherritt. And what he says is that mixed hydroxide precipitates, MHP, he says that is the form of nickel for the future. That's what everybody in the battery supply chain wants, is nickel and cobalt MHP, because, all sorts of reasons. It's a very pure form of nickel, and it's easy to take MHP and process it into battery precursor minerals or battery precursor metals. So we are now looking at adding a step to our processing at Turnagain. This will probably be part of our next stage of engineering studies, where we will produce a mixed hydroxide precipitate for sale to the market. And the reason we're looking at that is that the payables are much higher than you could expect to get from selling a concentrate to a smelter. And so we think it'll improve our economics by providing, basically MHP producers right now, is flying off the shelves. You can't, it's bought almost before it's produced. So and the demand is growing so strongly for that particular product that we think that's the future.
Now, Mark, the company looks set for strong growth in 2021, especially with, as you mentioned, nickel being such a key element in lithium-ion batteries. How are you placed to expand operations, and how do you expect to meet this increasing demand?
Well, in the mine development business, it's all about money, isn't it? And so, our main challenge is continuing to find enough money to develop a giant project. Every step of the way is, expensive, and so to meet that challenge, we are in active conversation with a number of potential strategic partners. And I can just tell you that we're very interested in attracting investment at the project level rather than into our stock by these strategic investors, because we think our market capitalization is much smaller than it should be. And so, project level investment is just simply better math for our shareholders. And I can tell you that there is real interest out there. People are starting to figure out in the battery space and in the electric vehicle space that if they don't have a long-term supply of nickel figured out, that the Chinese are going to eat them alive, because the Chinese have already figured this out. And they are building and have been building these HPAL projects in places like Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and so forth, with very low environmental standards, and they're very carbon intensive sources of nickel. But also these HPAL projects are not economic in Western terms. Like they might have an internal rate of return of 3 or 4%. But the Chinese are thinking strategically. They're not thinking, like a Western company needs a 20% internal rate of return, say, to build something. The Chinese companies are happy with, any kind of positive internal rate of return, even if the capital takes 15 or 20 years to pay back.
Mm-hmm.
They've got a long-term supply of nickel at a predictable price, which is the cost of production. And so they're using, extremely cheap capital to build these things, and they're securing their long-term supply with the intent of dominating the battery business and the electric vehicle business, and they're succeeding. And so the Western companies are starting to wake up to this now, and they're thinking that they need to secure their long-term supplies. We're getting calls out of the blue from people that I'm surprised that they're calling us. And so, I don't know exactly when something's going to happen, but I really get the sense that the temperature is turning up as we speak.
No, that's some great information for our investors there, Mark. Really appreciate it. Now, for company shareholders and potential investors, what kind of future development and progress can we expect at the 100% owned Turnagain property in northern BC?
Well, as I say, we are doing a work program right now that's designed to collect the information we need to advance the engineering to the pre-feasibility level. And so we'll be working on metallurgy and engineering through the coming year. We're hoping to have a pre-feas ready by the third quarter of 2022. So that's something to look forward to. But again, there's all these wild cards. I mean, as I say, we're talking to all sorts of people, and maybe nothing happens for a while. Maybe something happens all of it. Something will happen all of a sudden. It'll be unpredictable, and I think things could get very interesting if we actually can pull something out of our hats with a strategic.
Now, Mark, what separates Giga Metals from the other junior nickel mining competition, and what makes your business model so unique?
Well, we're not at this point, looking for a deposit. We found a deposit. Yeah. So we know what we've got. It's all about engineering and creating value. So it's the world needs more nickel. We've got a very large deposit. 37,000 ton per year facility for 37 years of mine life is that's big. And so, but the other aspect of this is that we'll be a low carbon producer of nickel. And we've put quite a bit of money and manpower behind studying this. Mm-hmm. Our tailings can absorb CO2 directly from the atmosphere. Wow. And so when you combine that with, getting our power for the project from the BC Hydro grid, which is basically, hydropower, so low carbon. In the future, we would want to have an all-electric mining fleet. That doesn't exist yet, but I think the market's moving that way. And then when you combine that with the measurable type of CO2 sequestration that we've demonstrated from our tailings in conjunction with work at UBC, we've got a very realistic goal of being a carbon neutral nickel mine. And I think that does distinguish us from a lot of other mining companies. And I think it's going to be important to the supply chain. People that buy electric vehicles want to feel like they're doing something good for the planet. And if they're getting, if the raw materials that go into those batteries are from, extremely high carbon nickel, for example, well, that's not exactly saving the planet, is it? So, I think that's an extremely important element of this whole story.
Well, it's all about those three initials right now, isn't it, Mark? ESG.
Yes, it is. And Canada has a very, very good reputation internationally for precisely those things. I mean, the environmental standards are very high, so it takes time and money to get your permits. However, you can build mines in Canada. I'm wondering in the United States whether you even can build mines anymore. Well, in some states you can. In some states it's very, very difficult. But in Canada you can build mines. You just simply have to meet very rigorous environmental standards. So that's one thing that the international community likes, is that they can feel good about the ethics of sourcing their metals in Canada. Also in British Columbia, in particular, in Canada in general, but British Columbia in particular, we've got quite good relations with our First Nations. And particularly where we're dealing with the Kaska and the Tahltan. And both of those nations are used to dealing with the mining business. There's a very vigorous mining culture in the north, and frankly, they're making a lot of money.
Yes, they are
out of the mining business. So, it's open for business. But that's all part of the social governance that people are concerned about in the supply chain.
The Golden Triangle is in many ways where it is at right now, for sure. Now. Yeah, Mark, I have to mention that your stock has had a very nice bump since late July. I believe nearly 30% increase in value in a relatively short span. So what can you tell our audience regarding the current valuation of your stock and why you think it's still a good buy right now?
Well, it's way too cheap in our view. We were at 35 cents, I think, and we ran up to about 45 cents. And I think we're back around 40 cents right now today. I'm not looking at a screen right now, except for the screen that I'm talking to you on. So, it took a bit of a bump and it's given some of that back. I just think that what's going to happen with this type of project, our market cap is roughly $30 or $35 million. With this type of project is very, very levers to the price of nickel. And our theory is that nickel has to go higher or new projects won't get built. And so if you believe the electric vehicle story, then a consequence of that is that nickel will have to go higher in order to bring on the amazing amount of new supply that's needed just for that business alone. It's estimated that 40 new large mines, similar to the size of Turnagain, will be needed by 2035 or so. And so that's a tall order. And we'll just have to see how that goes.
Okay, now, Mark, what's the long-term strategy for the company moving into 2021 and beyond? And what should retail and institutional investors be looking out for?
Well, again, it's all about the strategics as far as we're concerned. And that's something I can't predict the timing of. Nobody can. But, I just think this is the sort of investment, that if you're looking to position in nickel, this is a very leveraged way to play it, because if nickel goes higher, this type of project the valuation goes much, much higher. It's got that kind of leverage. And again, the critical events, the timing is not predictable. So I think what you do as an investor, what I do personally with this type of thing is I'll just buy for the long term. I'll try and pick an entry point where I think the price is reasonable or cheap. I like cheap as an investor. I don't like it as a CEO of a company, but as an investor, I like cheap. And I tend to accumulate stock myself and then wait, because you don't know when the critical events are going to happen. And when they happen, it's usually too late to buy. So,
oh, that's well put, Mark. Now, can you tell our audience a little bit about your corporate management and board teams, along with the experience and innovative ideas that they bring to the nickel and cobalt mining space?
well, I've already mentioned Martin Vidra, our president, and he's the one that's in charge of our conversations with strategics because he knows them all. He's sold them nickel and cobalt in his previous incarnation as an executive at Sherritt International, which is a nickel and cobalt producer and has been for several decades now. Also, someone very experienced in that area is our board member, Robert Morris. Before he joined our board, he was the senior executive at Vale, and he was in charge of worldwide sales of base metals for Vale. So copper, nickel, cobalt, and precious metals. But I mean, Vale is one of the largest producers of nickel in the world, and cobalt. And so the portfolio that he was in charge of worldwide, depending on commodity prices, ranged between $5 and $8 billion a year. He knows all the strategics extremely well. They know him. And so in terms of building trust with, say, Japanese companies and Korean companies and Chinese companies and Western companies, they all know Martin and they know Bob, and they know that these are people that would only be involved with a quality company.
Well, finally, Mark, if there's anything that I've overlooked in this interview, please feel free to elaborate.
I think you've covered it very well. Thanks, Dave.
Well, I try. That's what we're all about here at Stockhouse. And once again, Mark, thanks for joining us here today. We look forward to chatting with you again.
Very good. Thank you, Dave. Appreciate it.
Oh, our pleasure. We have been speaking with Mark Jarvis. He is the Chief Executive Officer of Giga Metals Corp. I'd like once again to thank Mr. Jarvis for joining us and sharing this insightful information about his company with our Stockhouse video podcast audience and investors. Giga Metal trades on the TSX Venture Exchange under the symbol, appropriately, GIGA or Giga, and the OTCQX ticker, HNCKF. I'm Dave Jackson for Stockhouse Media. Thanks for watching.